The Rollright Stones are a set of standing stones located on the border of Oxfordshire and Warwickshire in the United Kingdom. They date back over 5,000 years, with the earliest monument being constructed around 3,500 BC. There are three distinct sites at this complex. The first and biggest, the stone circle called the King's Men. Over the road in a field by himself stands the solitary King's Stone. And a little further down the track lie the conspiratorial Whispering Knights, huddled together. Legend has it that these are the petrified remains of a king whose army was marching across the Cotswolds. The army happened upon a local witch by the name of Mother Shipton. She challenged the king and said, "7 long strides thou shalt take," says she, "and if Long Compton thou canst see, King of England thou shalt be." The king's knights gathered in a circle to discuss this challenge and the wisdom in dealing with a witch. As they debated upon the best course of action, the king boldly took off by himself and took 7 steps forward towards the village of Longer Compton. As he took his 7th step, the witch made the ground to rise up, blocking the view between himself and the village. She turned to the king and cackled. "As Long Compton thou canst not see, King of England thou shalt not be. Rise up stick and stand still stone, for King of England thou shalt be none. Thou and thy men horstone shall be, and I myself an elder tree." Thus the knights that stayed in circle and debated became the king's men, the stone circle we walk around today. In a field over the road stands the solitary stone on its own. This is the king who strode off to the village of Long Compton. Further away stands a group of stones called the Whispering Knights, the third site in this complex. These are the knights who lagged behind and plotted against the king, and stood by themselves whispering their treachery, but they were all turned to stone by the witch's curse. It is said that the witch turned into an elder tree, still in the bushes to this day, and if you were to cut this tree down, the stones would spring back to life, the curse broken. Aside from the creation myth, there are other legends and folklore that surround the area. The stones of the King's Men's Circle are said to be uncountable, and trying to do so will always result in different numbers. Anyone who thrice counts the same number will have their heart's desire fulfilled. A local baker swore he could count them himself by placing a loaf on each of the stones. He then planned to count the exact number as he collected them. However, when he came to claim them, some of the loaves were missing, spirited away by the devil himself or by local fae folk. The king and the knights were strong in their faith, and on certain saints' days or holidays, they are said to come to life. If you are frequenting one of the local taverns on these nights, you may see strangers who seem out of place and time, but enjoying a solemn drink before disappearing into the night. On a more regular basis, the King's Stone in the field on its own can sometimes wake up around midnight. There he converses with passers-by, lamenting his fate and for that of his loyal men. Some local girls claim that if they ran around the stones naked at midnight on midsummer, they would see the man they were to marry. This is based upon beliefs from earlier, where you might be able to hear conversations of the living king and his men discussing amongst themselves, talking of ages past and in some cases things yet to be, for they were now beyond time. Misfortune was also said to follow those who would desecrate or break the stones. A local farmer tried to remove the largest stone to create a bridge over a stream. It took 24 horses to take the stone to where the bridge would be made, and 2 men perished in the endeavour. When in place, the stone kept on flipping over, making the bridge unusable. Eventually, when the farmer decided to put the stone back, it took only a single horse to take it back up the hill. Curious people who chip bits off the stones to take home as souvenirs will soon find their carts, or maybe even cars now, inoperable. Today the stones stand accepting of anyone who comes to visit them. There are still several offerings in the trees and on the stones themselves from people who come to this place to reconnect with their history, or perhaps to gain an audience with the king and his men when they awaken once more. The Shugborough Estate is a stately home and gardens located in Staffordshire, England. It is the historic seat of the Anson family. With a grand 17th century main hall, the site is a popular tourist destination and sees its fair share of guests every year. But not all of the visitors will be aware of the stranger tales linked to the estate. To begin with, the name itself comes from the Old Celtic meaning goblin or devil mound, although the reason it was named this has been lost to time. Shugborough also sits on the border of Cannock Chase, the forested region that has a number of myths and legends of its own, from black-eyed children to werewolves, pigmen, aliens and ghosts. For such a beautiful and quiet place, it does seem that the unknown is never far away. As is tradition, Shugborough has its tales of ghosts and hauntings. In this case, it's the former lady of the house, Lady Harriet, who can be heard gently knocking on doors and rustling her many silken dresses. However, not all mysteries are ethereal in nature. Indeed, the most perplexing of Shugborough's secrets are based around physical monuments and centre upon the Anson family. It was well known that Lord Anson was a collector of oddities, and his brother a famed adventurer and seafarer who navigated the world. His voyages bring him back any number of priceless and rare artefacts and tales to ignite the imagination. The most famous mystery of Shugborough is that of the Shepherd's Monument. This mysterious folly sits alone in the gardens of the estate. The main part of it is a relief of a copy of the painting called Et in Arcadia Ego, Latin for I am also in Arcadia, or I am even in Arcadia, referring to death. The monument features some changes from the original painting, the most interesting being a 10-letter cipher etched below the relief. Formed of 2 lines, the top being 8 letters, O, U, O, S, V, A, V, V. These are then framed on the second line by 2 letters, D and M. For centuries, the cryptic message has left researchers scratching their heads. To this day, no one has cracked the cipher, despite some of the world's best codebreakers giving it a try. This includes some of the people who cracked the Enigma code during World War II. But why is it so important? Well, one of the theories is that the code points the way to the Holy Grail. The story goes that on his adventures, Lord Anson came across the whereabouts, or at least close to the whereabouts, of the legendary Grail. Upon returning to his home, he commissioned the Shepherd's Monument to be built with clues pointing the way to anyone who could decipher them. Of course, there are more mundane theories as well. It could just be a simple dedication to his lost love. It could be a dedication to lost friends, or just a message to his ancestors. Whatever the cause, the mystery has inspired sleuths for generations. The true meaning may never be known. Another mysterious monument sits close by. It is an often overlooked but personal favourite of mine. The Cat's Monument, over the Red Bridge near the Chinese house, in what used to be an overgrown and forgotten part of the gardens. Only with recent landscaping is the monument being discovered by new generations. The monument was built to commemorate a cat. While this may be obvious, which cat it is dedicated to is unknown. It could be Lord Anson's favoured Caulke Khan, or perhaps the Admiral's cat that accompanied him on his journeys around the world. Whatever the case, a monument of this size dedicated to a cat is rare and shows a strong connection between the owner and his feline friend. It could be this connection that draws the mysterious cat or its descendants back to this place. For there are stories of visitors to the garden meeting an exotic feline around the base of this monument, one that doesn't look like any native species, and a cat that disappears in the blink of an eye. Perhaps the monuments around Shugborough are just there to look pretty, follies built to be enjoyed by the 17th century upper class. But maybe, just maybe, the Anson family knew that the only messages that last forever are the ones that are etched in stone. The United Kingdom has its fair share of monuments, statues and great sites. Amongst some of the most prolific are the hillside horses known as the white or chalk horses. There are over 24 of these hill figures in various parts of the country, although the majority of them lay in the south, around the counties of Wiltshire and Oxfordshire. The oldest and most famous of these is the Uffington horse, which dates back some 3,000 years into the country's antiquity. Situated on the aptly named White Horse Hill, the ancient figure looks out over the Oxfordshire countryside. Being so old, it is unknown as to the exact origin of the Uffington horse, or the reason why it was carved into this very hill. Indeed, there is some debate about whether it's supposed to be a depiction of a horse at all, with some theorising that it could have originally been a depiction of a dragon. Scans of the area have confirmed that the picture has changed a little over its vast lifespan. By far the most common theory is that the horse was carved in honour of one of the Celtic gods. In nearby Gaul, the Celts were known to worship the horse goddess Epona, and in Britain she had the counterpart named Rhiannon. It is also possible that the horse was cut to honour the Celtic sun god Belenos. He was known to drive a sun chariot, pulled by white horses. The very placement of the Uffington white horse on the hill could have been made so that it was visible directly to the sun, and for them to show their fealty to their deity. The horse itself has many myths and legends around it. It is said to come to life at least once a year, and on this night it will go down to the local pasture named the Manger. Here it will drink from the nearby Woolston Wells, which was actually formed from a hoofprint of the great horse. When it makes this journey to water, it is accompanied by its foal, who used to reside on the hill beside it, but over the years has vanished from sight. Every 100 years or so, the horse will also travel even further and gallop across the very sky to be reshod by the god Wayland in his smithy. This Neolithic site can still be visited today and is used by modern pagans and druids for ritual purposes. Local tales say the last time the horse visited the smithy was around 1920, so it could happen again at any time in the near future. The area also has links with other famous British folklore. Just down from the horse lies the flat-topped hill known as Dragon Hill. This is supposed to be the very spot that St. George killed his famous dragon. Where the dragon fell, its blood poisoned the ground and left a white chalk scar for all to see. This story does lend credence to the theory that the horse was originally supposed to be a dragon, and it was a reminder of the very heroic feat that we still talk about to this day. King Arthur is also mentioned in the legends of the area. As is well known, King Arthur is said to be sleeping in a hill, awaiting to return to England and lead it in its hour of greatest need. When this occurs, his steed, the Uffington horse, will rise up and dance on the nearby Dragon Hill, awaiting to once again be ridden by its master. Finally, the Uffington horse is said to grant a wish to anyone who stands in the horse's eye. If they rotate clockwise 3 times and speak their heart desire, it will come true. However, this is now harder to do and is frowned upon, as over the years the vast amount of footfall has damaged the horse, and it is now fenced off. The maintenance of the horse became a tradition of itself, with the local festival known as the Scouring of the White Horse taking place all the way back to the 1700s, although nowadays the maintenance is carried out by National Trust volunteers. The only time in 3,000 years that the horse has not been visible was when it was covered during World War II to prevent it being used by Luftwaffe bombers as a navigation point. Today, White Horse Hill is a great place to visit, to walk around the old Iron Age fort, and to connect back to the times of our Celtic ancestors. Alderley Edge is a village that lies just 13 miles south of the major city of Manchester. Although the village is first mentioned back in a charter in the 13th century, evidence of settlement in the area goes back much further. Evidence of copper mining in the Bronze Age has been found. Items belonging to the Roman Empire were discovered nearby. An area with such a long history, it's no surprise that there are many stories and myths in the area. The most famous of these, and the one which has captured the most imagination, is the story of the Wizard of Alderley Edge. The legend goes that a farmer from nearby Mobley was walking the road to the market town of Macclesfield. He rode upon a fine milk-white horse which he intended to sell for a good price. While passing over the escarpment at Alderley Edge, the farmer was startled by the appearance of an old man. This stranger was tall, undeniably ancient, and dressed in a flowing garment. He ordered the farmer to stop and advised that he knew he was on the way to sell the fine horse, but that he needed it and would offer a fair price for it. The farmer, though, had grander riches in mind and denied the request. The old man smiled and said, "Go then to Macclesfield, but mark my words, you will not sell this horse. When you find this be true, meet me again this evening, and I will buy it from you." The farmer just laughed at the prophecy and continued on his way. To his surprise, though, he was unable to sell the horse, despite it being a particularly fine beast. Though many admired it and expressed an interest, none came forward to purchase it. Dejected, he traced his way back home, passing once again over the escarpment at Alderley Edge. There, the old man waited for him. Upon seeing the farmer, the old man once again smiled. He looked him directly in the eye. "Follow me," he commanded, and led the farmer deeper into the forest. They went silently as he led them by the Seven Firs, the Golden Stone by Stormy Point, and Saddle Bowl. The further they went, the more apprehensive the farmer got. Surely it was not wise to deal with a stranger in such a lonely area. As he was about to turn around and leave the old man, he thought he heard a horse neighing, but it sounded muffled, as if it was coming from underground. As he stopped to ponder this, he noticed that the old man had also ceased to move. He faced a blank stone wall, and with a single gesture, he tapped it with a wand. Where once there was nothing but rock, there now was a set of large iron gates. At the old man's gesture, with a sound like a thunderclap, they flew open. At the noise, the horse panicked and reared up, throwing the farmer from his saddle. The terrified farmer fell to his knees and begged for his life to be spared. The old man now revealed himself as a mighty wizard. He spoke to the terrified farmer. "Fear nothing, and behold this sight which no mortal eye has ever looked upon." He then looked further into the cave, where the farmer saw an amazing sight. A countless number of men and horses filled the open cavern. The men were all dressed as noble knights of old, and the horses were all perfectly milk-white. There in the depths of the earth, they slept soundly. The wizard reached into a vast pile of treasure, of which there was many, and provided the farmer with his payment. He explained that this army slept here ready to be called forth when the country needed it most. Each knight needed a horse, but one more was needed to make it complete, and this was the horse that the farmer had just sold. The wizard turned to him. "Go home in safety. Leave your horse with me, and no harm will befall you. But henceforward no mortal will ever look upon the iron gates. Be gone." The farmer hurried out of the cave as fast as he could, and as he left he heard the noise of the iron gates closing behind him with a fearful sound. When he turned to look, there was nothing again but the bare rock face. The tale of the Wizard of Alderley Edge has inspired people for generations. The author Alan Garner started his literary career with the book The Weird Stone of Brisingamen, which draws much from the legend of the wizard. Local businesses are also influenced by the tale, and after a hard day of searching for the mythological cavern, maybe you'll stop by at the Wizard Tea Room for a drink and an ice cream. If you were to visit one of the hundreds of historical sites in the United Kingdom, you may, if you were to look closely, see on wooden timbers and doors faint scratches and marks. Some of these will be mason marks used in the construction of the building. Others will be graffiti. But up and down the country, the same designs are seen time and again. These are the witch marks, symbols that have come from antiquity and have been used for centuries to protect the dwellers inside from evil. A prime example of the marks can be found in Little Morton Hall in Cheshire. This beautiful manor house has survived pretty much untouched for hundreds of years. It dates back to the times of the Tudor kings and queens. All told, the house has some 250 witch marks scattered over its 3 floors, ranging from simple taper burn looking marks to more intricate daisy wheels and hexafoils. Often placed at points of entry or potential points of weakness in the building, such as windows, chimneys, and of course doorways. They were placed to add a level of spiritual protection to complement the physical protection that the walls already provided. The marks in the video are from Little Morton Hall and are quite difficult to see with the naked eye. These dated back to when the house was built hundreds of years ago and were quite common for buildings at the time. The witch marks can be found on any building, from humble cottages to great lordly manors, from simple barns to the grandest of churches. You can also find ritual protection marks on furniture, on gravestones, on travelling chests, and anything in between. They have also been found scratched into the entryway of caves, placed there to protect the families who may have harboured inside. Some of these symbols have been traced back to antiquity, having been used in the country for thousands of years. However, these ancient symbols were still in use up until the 19th century. They even had a resurgence of popularity in and around the Tudor times. Despite the country being very heavily Christianized, the people still had their superstitions to cling to. When King Henry VIII instituted the English Reformation and the dissolution of the monasteries, a lot of the peasant folk fell back onto these familiar and comforting rituals. But how do they function? It is hard to say what they may or may not have originally meant. In the United Kingdom, one of the most popular marks is the hexafoil, or the daisy wheel. This can be found the length and breadth of the isle, with the earliest examples going back to some 3000 BC. With such an age behind them, it is theorized that they reflect something known even to those ancient times, perhaps representing the sun as a ward against the terrors that lie in the darkness. Later explanations include them being a kind of demon jail, the idea being that if a demon or evil spirit were to see them, it would follow the lines, and as they are fully connected and circular, the demon would trace them forever and be lost. The taper burn marks seen in this video at first seem to be just burn marks from candles. Indeed, that is what they originally identified as. However, burn marks were found in places where no candles could have been, such as behind floorboards and wallboards. It is believed they are actually a good luck charm to ward off fire and lightning. The cross hatches, very barely seen in this video, are believed to be intertwined letter V's. This is thought to stand for Virgo Virginium, which means Virgin of Virgins, and is thought to attempt to invoke the Holy Mother herself as a form of protection. While these symbols may be the most common in the United Kingdom, this form of apotropaic magic is widespread throughout the world. The symbols may vary and the reasoning behind them may differ, but there is not a single civilization on Earth that does not have protection symbols. This is folklore passed down from generation to generation, from mothers to daughters. Whether or not it is effective, we cannot say, but it forms part of our history and our story. folklore in the United Kingdom can be quite random and can quite often centre around the oddest of items. Everything from buildings to books, stones to statues, and even just bits of nature like rivers and even the wind. One such famous site is a certain oak tree that lies just outside of the village of Alton, along the path known as Barbary Gutter. This ancient path once led from the village of Alton to St Giles's Church in Cheadle. It is heavily wooded and at times reasonably steep, but the most interesting point is the massive oak tree covered in large metal chains. But why is this tree covered in chains? There are many stories from local areas, but perhaps the most famous is that of the Earl of Shrewsbury. In fact, the story is so famous, it became the basis of a ride at the nearby world-famous theme park of Alton Towers. The ride is called Hex, the Legend of the Towers, and has been thrilling guests to the park since the year 2000. The story goes that the Earl of Shrewsbury was riding home to the Towers in the mid-1800s. Somewhere along the trail his carriage came across an old beggar woman, standing huddled at the side of the road. As the Earl got nearer, the woman approached him and started to beg for coin. Being a greedy and callous man, the Earl shunned her and pushed her away from the carriage. There, as she lay in the mud, she cursed the Earl, saying that every branch that fell from the tree would mean the death of a member of his family. Of course, the Earl did not believe such tales and continued on his journey, paying the beggar woman no further mind. But soon, there was a great storm in the area, and the wind howled through the forested regions of East Staffordshire. When the morning came and the Earl ventured out into the woodlands, he saw the tree the beggar lady had cursed, and one of the great branches was now lying on the ground next to it. Seconds after he saw this, one of his servants came running up to him to bring him the terrible news that a family member had perished. Shaken to his core, he remembered the words of the beggar lady from the night before, and immediately fell to his knees in despair. Shortly afterwards, he ordered the construction of great iron chains. These were brought to the tree and wrapped around it in order to prevent the falling of any other branches, and although the Earl is long gone, the chains and the tree remain to this day. This isn't the only story of why there are chains on the tree. A different tale of an older story, one where the villagers of East Staffordshire were terrorised by a malevolent spirit. For many seasons the spirit caused trouble by rotting crops and spooking animals. Salvation came in the form of an ancient wise woman, possibly even a witch, who came forward to contain the beast. She did battle with the spirit and eventually bound it into the trunk of a great oak tree. Then, for extra protection, she bound the tree in great metal chains of solid iron. Metal, of course, is anathema to the fey folk and spirits. Although the chains that now bind the tree have been traced to construction much later than this supposed story, it goes that they were replaced to, of course, stop the spirit from escaping again. And this explains why the steps that lead up to the tree are far older than the chains that currently encompass it. A final and more light-hearted story has a tinker passing by the oak and asking a fellow traveller about the large tree. The other traveller, heralding from France, responded with the word chêne, this being the French word for oak. Upon hearing this, the tinker thought the traveller quite mad. It was obvious that this was a great oak tree, and not a chain. But for some unknown reason, he then decided to drape the tree in heavy iron chains. Perhaps as a joke to mock the Frenchman, perhaps as a way to remind himself of the word, perhaps none of the above. We may never know the original reason for why the chains were wrapped around the tree, but much like the tree and the chains itself, the stories will last for many years to come.